Welcome, boys and girls, to another exciting episode and the grand finale of MASH. Um, we're going to be getting into Three's Company and Family Guy. Before that, we're going to do a quiz. This is the OPPPQ, or the Overpowered Poker Pop Quiz. By the way, thanks for the recommendation. This was Marlon's idea, so shout out to Mr. Santana. How's Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, my friend? I too do the BJJ, my friend. That's how the Gracies talk. Who else? Was it Gerard? Well, I had a couple of students, people that I've worked with, and poker friends mentioned that it would be good to do a quiz type thing for this series because it is the longest series that I've ever done. We went wide with this one. Hopefully it worked out well, and this is going to be how we find out. The proof, so they speak, is in the pudding. We're going to have this pop quiz, this test, this quiz on the contents of the Overpowered Poker series from start to finish. We're going to do this in two sections and two videos. There's two sections on this video, and there'll be a second video where I give the answers and a little bit of additional info about how we got to these answers. So section 1 is going to be just very basic strategy. Then on to section 2, we're going to talk about flops, turns, and rivers, which really turned out to be the format of the video series. That's kind of the direction I went with it. Was we had a kind of general section and a couple like introductory type videos, and then one on flop play, two on flop play actually, one on turn play and one on river play, and a couple of little deviations from the norm, so to speak. You're a deviation from the norm. So section 1, question 1, which is the most reasonable way to continuation bet flops? So like, what kind of a c-bet strategy should we have? So we raise pre-flop, we get called, say by one player. We go heads up to the flop. Which is the best way to think about it? Think about our c-betting strategy, that is. Would that be A, that c-bets are so high in value that we should continuation bet 100% or close to it, heads up, and plan on waiting until the turn to split our range? So should we c-bet everything on the flop and wait until later streets to maybe polarize or, well, split our range? Or is the answer B, that continuation betting is actually overrated and we should probably only c-bet our strongest hands because against most players, because most players are going to expect us to be bluffing a lot when we c-bet? Maybe we should not be bluffing a lot when we c-bet. Or could the answer be C, that c-betting our strong and weak hands tends to make the most sense, but we ought to tend to check with the middle strength hands? So should we bet like the top and bottom of our range and typically check, either check back or check and maybe check fold or check call with the middle range? So should we do like a, well, I guess that's enough time spent on question 1. We got 10 of these bitches to get through. Section 1, basic strategy 1.2 is section 1, question 2, ICM, which is independent chip modeling. This is a thing that applies to tournament play where there's a payout structure, and basically, well, I don't want to give anything away here. Okay, so question 2, ICM considerations in multi-table tournament situations. When we are far from the money, and we're in the early blind rounds with an average stack, which is true. A, so which one of these is true? A, that the ICM considerations are completely irrelevant when we're very far from the money. B, that the ICM should have a massive effect on our open ranges but shouldn't affect our flat calling ranges. Pre-flop we're talking here. C, should cause us to open tighter and call wider. Or D, will only affect us a bit at the start of the tournament but become more important as the tournament progresses. So does it get more important as we get further on into the tournament, closer to the money, etc., closer to the bubble? Section 1, question 3. When you're in position against a decent thinking opponent, your 3-bet ranges should tend to be what? A, linear, merged, like linear/merged, because we should have a strong 3-bet range when we're against a strong opponent. B, should tend to be polarized because we want to use the best hands and the worst hands in our continuance range to build our 3-betting range with, and then flat call with the hands that are in the middle of our continuing range. And that's not implying any relationship of size. It's not like I'm saying top, bottom, and middle third. Or linear, which is, again, kind of the same thing as merged. If you're linear, you're just using some cusp hand and every hand better than that. So that's linear. Merged usually means the same thing, although sometimes merged can be meant in a different way. Like you can sometimes use merged to mean like every hand in your continuing range. If you have like a merged 3-betting range, sometimes you're not going to have a flatting range. You're just going to 3-bet your entire continuing range. But linear and merged are roughly the same idea. Linear just means like the best hands in your range. So linear and bluff heavy, we want to induce as many mistakes as possible. And this being linear and bluff heavy, is the way to do it versus most good players. Well, 1.4. Okay, so that's section 1, question 4. Polarizing our aggression is a useful tool against many opponents, and that means against a variety of many different opponents. It doesn't mean in multi-way situations necessarily. So polarizing our aggression is a useful tool against, we should say, like most opponents, which is not an advantage of polarizing our aggression. So which one of these is not a good thing about polarizing? So like it's either not a good thing or it's not about polarizing. A, it makes your decision to continue or not continue against a raise relatively easy. Like as easy as it really could be. You know, does it lend itself? Does it tend to typically make our decisions to continue against a raise or re-raise, I guess you'd say. A re-raise, I guess you'd say. Easier on average than if we had like a more merged or some other some other range constructed in some other way. B, increased efficiency / helps you to play more hands profitably in many spots. This means like so the question is which one of these doesn't fit, like which isn't a good answer. And what this B thing here is that I'm saying that if B is one of the correct things, then it's not the answer. And that this thing is that I'm suggesting here is that having a polarized range, one of the good things about having a polarized range might be that it increases your efficiency. It helps you to play more hands profitably in many spots. So is that true? If so, it's not the answer. Get it? C, it makes it very difficult for a villain to call and forces him to raise or fold most of his range in most situations. So is there something about the polarized nature of our range that would cause him to have to respond by typically either raising or folding against our raise? Like, is it going to be difficult for him to flat and force him to either fold or come back over the top? Is that a thing that is about polarization and is good and logical, consistent, positive, and having to do with polarization? If not, it could be the answer. If so, then it's not the answer. D, it allows your opponent to make mistakes with a lot of the hands in his or her range. So would polarizing your aggressive ranges make it relatively easier for your opponent to make mistakes? Would it give your opponent more difficult decisions with more hands that they'll have? Okay, moving on. I like that pattern. That was pretty cool. Section 1, question 5. The fundamental factors of hand anatomy, according to Navonod, that's me, are, so which one of these is the way that I explain the fundamental factors of hand anatomy, or the fundamental factors of your hands no, that's not it. What are my fundamental factors of where does the value come from in your starting hands? Like, where do you get the value? What about ace king? Let's say, like, what about ace king offsuit, ace 2 suited, jack 10 suited, pocket 2s, pocket 5s, pocket aces, queen jack suited, king queen? What about those hands makes them hands that we would likely play in a lot of situations, whereas other hands like 7-2 offsuit we're not going to play? Like, what is it about the hands that you do play that makes you want to play them, or should make you want to play them? Where does the incentive come from? Where's the value? How do we pull value out of the two cards that we start with? Fundamentally, and these are the post-flop factors, by the way. So would we say A, playability, equity realization, EV, and implied odd or reverse implied odds potential? B, power, covertness, frequent strength, fold equity, and equity when called. C, fold equity, EV, equity when called, and nut potential. D, SDV, which is showdown value / hot cold equity, domination, nut potential, and synergy. Or E, frequent strength, implied odds, board coverage, and blocker effects. Yeah, so that is going just way too far, too long. It's taking a lot of time. And so we're going to turn this into a little mini-series within a series, and this is part 1 of 2 of 3 of part whatever we're on, OPP. Thanks for watching, and I already have the entire thing finished. You can email your your answers to me, and I'll try to contact you. Please start some discussion in the comments, and I'll have part 2 out and 3 shakes of the lambs buttocks.